Good morning, everyone. This is the first indication that I've seen that the NDP might vote against the throne speech and thereby plunge us into an election. And I don't know about the Bloc. I haven't seen indications from the Bloc. The Bloc has already said we need Morneau and Trudeau to step down and resign, or will trigger, will help trigger an election. I don't know if they still think that. That was, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So things could have changed between then and now, right? And between then and now, Morneau did step down, and Bardish Chagger is set to be the next one to go if the public and the other parties demand more, right? Looks like, just speculative. But here, Jagmeet Singh in an interview with Evan Solomon, and I think they posted the wrong video because that's not Jagmeet or Evan. This is a Nanos interview about polling. But in the interview, Jagmeet says, no question Trudeau's to blame. CTV is reporting. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh places blame for We Charity's Canada exit squarely at Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's feet. His finger-pointing comes in the wake of We Charity's Wednesday announcement that it is selling off its assets, eliminating staff, and winding down operations in Canada months after finding itself at the center of a political scandal. During an interview with Evan Solomon for CTV Question Period, airing Sunday, Solomon asked Singh where he places the blame for the charity's destruction in Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, there's no doubt about it, Singh replied, not skipping a beat. There are many things that could have been done directly to help students instead of creating a brand new program and then falling into all sorts of inappropriate activities. Yeah, like you could have actually helped the students. You could have funded the summer jobs program, but he declined to do that. Instead, he wanted to give money to a big company that doesn't speak French, and paid his family money and sent the finance minister on a free vacation right up until the day the finance minister testified at the parliamentary committee about that, and then he paid it back because, whoops, he forgot. Here's the rest of the article. I scroll down a little bit. Still, while the charity may be leaving the country, Singh says many unanswered questions remain here in Canada, especially relating to a huge pile of We Charity documents the Liberals released as they announced Parliament's prorogation, which halted all committee studies into the issue. Quote, there were a host of documents, a massive number of documents that were released, and none of those documents were able to be put to witness after they were released, Singh said. He said that witnesses, including potentially both the Prime Minister and the Youth Minister, Bardish Chagger, should eventually be called before committee to face new questions that arose as a result of these new documents. Now, does an election erase this? If we have an election, and I don't know the answer to this, I'm speculating right now, I don't know. If we have an election, so we've prorogued Parliament, so that kills all the committees and everything that's happening, it's all done. Any laws that we're moving through, it's all done, right? Nothing can get made into law, nothing can get royal assent, nothing. Until Parliament comes back and they do a throne speech. So the next thing that has to happen in Canadian Parliament is the throne speech. Assuming the confidence is maintained and the same Prime Minister and the same group of people return to Parliament, you can resume the investigations, no problems. But what happens if the throne speech doesn't pass, there's an election triggered, and roughly the same group of people come back? Like, let's say 10% churn, right? And I don't know what the churn was from the last election, but let's just say 10%. So 10% different people in positions of power. I don't know what the makeup is, majority, minority, or anything to that effect. But let's say Trudeau's got control of the Parliament and is a minority, let's just say. Would then the committees be allowed to resume the investigation into We? At that point, would then the fallout from We be kind of just swept under the rug because it's been legitimized by an election? That's the stuff that I'm kind of concerned about, because the Liberals will say this election says that the Canadian public want to go in the direction of the throne speech we held before the election, and those other things don't matter because the Canadian public said, yeah, they don't matter. We've returned these people to the power seat, basically. Now, if Erin O'Toole becomes the Prime Minister, say again in a minority situation, just for argument's sake, would those investigations then be seen as political retribution? Would they not take them up anyway? I don't know if they take them up. I would want to see them taken up, but I feel like it's the same as the lock her up crowd from the Hillary Clinton in the States, right? People want to see legal action, and I don't know if it's tradition. I don't know, but usually that doesn't usually happen, right? If an election gets held and the in power people get swept out, regardless of the criminality or the appearance of criminality or the appearance of impropriety, nothing happens, right? And you can have a strong case, right? Like obstruction of justice, for instance, for example, right? Just to use one off the top of my head. and still nothing could happen, right? I wonder where Brenda Lucky is. She's making sure people are jumping 3.5 feet, 4 feet, whatever it is. Where's Gail? Okay, and I think that so those are all concerns that are just, what happens if, and we're talking about a massive spending increase and a massive increase to taxes too, specifically heating taxes and carbon taxes. Here's the Roy Green show, and he says Yves Giroux, Parliamentary Budget Officer, has twice told us on air that GBI, Guaranteed Basic Income, or Universal Basic Income, UBI, will cost taxpayers $45 to $91 billion, and that's for 6 months. Guaranteed Basic Income emerges as top policy priority for Liberals amid COVID-19. Here's that article Global News is reporting. So Guaranteed Basic Income emerges as top policy priority for Liberals MP amid COVID-19. A guaranteed basic income for all Canadians has emerged as the top policy choice of Liberal MPs, just as the Trudeau government is crafting its plan to help people weather the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and rebuild the ravaged economy. Liberal caucus is calling on the government to adopt the idea in a priority policy resolution for consideration at the party's upcoming national convention. And MPs consider it so important that they've designated it their top resolution, guaranteeing that it will go directly to the November 12th to 15th convention for debate and a vote. It is among the more than 50 priority resolutions from the government's party, provincial and territorial organizations, and its various commissions that will be the subject starting today of a 2-week online discussion amongst registered Liberals. The Liberal MPs are not alone in urging guaranteed basic income. The 50 resolutions include numerous calls from all corners of the country pressing the government to adopt the idea in one form or another. I scroll down a bit. The pressure of an overhaul of Canada's social safety net comes just as the Liberal government is preparing for a throne speech on September 23rd, laying out its plan for protecting Canadians during the pandemic, which is heating up again after a bit of summer lull, and for reviving the economy. I scroll down just a little bit again. The government hastily announced the $2,000 a month Canada Emergency Response Benefit, CERB, to fill the void, which the caucus resolution calls a progressive and transformative program that supported 8.5 million Canadians and proved to be both effective and popular. Advocates had hoped that the CERB would eventually evolve into permanent guaranteed basic income, but the program is now winding down to be replaced by more generous and flexible employment insurance. And while some ministers had initially suggested the CERB could pave the way for basic income, government insiders now suggest that kind of major reform is not in the cards while the pandemic continues to rage. So the caucus resolution isn't a resolution from on high, right? This is what the caucus wants to talk about and set the direction for the Liberal Party. And the Liberal Party is, as far as I understand it, winding down the CERB, but replacing it with something that is more generous with less hours needed to be worked. $400 a week is more by $200 than the CERB was, because the CERB kicked off at $1,000. It's problematic because it's expensive. Here's Aaron Werdick, and he's a federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and he says, suppose that we did just half the CERB amount, $1,000 a month, and suppose we only gave it to those 18 and over, around 30 million people. That's still $360 billion a year, larger than the entire federal budget last year. Which taxes will they raise to pay for it, or what will they cut? And that's the question. Like, at some point, the balance is it's not gonna be there anymore, and it's gonna flip, right? And we're seeing already businesses having a hard time attracting people to come work for them, because with hours the way they are, you're guaranteed more money on CERB or on UBI, or excuse me, not UBI, on the EI program that they've set to replace CERB. Now, I'm not a proponent of saying you have to turn it off in austerity right away. You can't do that to people, right? You have to incentivize not a migration off of the program, but it's like a weaning program. You have to make sure that the businesses can ramp up, that the hiring can increase, and that way you can get those people off that incentive, right? And there should be some kind of program that doesn't punish you for going to work necessarily, right? Like, but the idea is to replace the income, right? Like, you're not supposed to end up with twice your income at the end of the situation. You're supposed to go back to work. And like, policy like that is hard because you're dealing with people, and there are people whose specific circumstances are outside of the norm, right? And what's happening though is those specific circumstances are being generalized, and solving problems that way leads to very, very broad and expensive programs that aren't possible to sustain. You can't sustain a program that's a whole lot more than the entire federal budget of last year. Like, you can't just do that. You can't just say, oh yeah, no problem. We got the money. We can just print it. We got the printers. See? They've been running for weeks, printing money. We got the money. So, like, you can't do that though, because eventually you run out of other people's money, right? You can't just keep printing, because then runaway inflation happens and bread starts to cost a lot more money, right? Because the money is devalued. So, and I'm not an economist, so get a second opinion with the economy stuff. But I believe that if you just continue printing money, that's not good for the economy. That's a net bad. Okay. But talk to people who know about money, because I'm not one of those people. Okay. And here's while we're doing this, while we're spending more money than last year's, or while we're even debating spending more money than last year's full budget combined on just one social safety net program, they're also talking about increasing taxes on things that everybody needs to use. And it's not you have a choice to use something else that does it as well. The choice is between you can use it and pay the money, the increased taxes, or you could not use it. And they would much prefer that you not use it, because then that cuts down on their CO2 rates, right? That's the point of a CO2 tax, to get you to choose other choices, right? Rather than your car transit, rather than heating a blanket, right? Right. That's the idea. But when it becomes completely unaffordable, then and people aren't doing it by choice, but just by virtue of necessity, then that's not good. Okay, so here's Greg McLean, and who is he? Oh, that's a nice picture of him. He's a Conservative MP for Calgary Centre and the Shadow Minister for Natural Resources and Economic Development. And he says, rumors that Liberals are considering a clean fuel standard, the equivalent of a $350 per ton carbon tax. If you think it's costly to heat your home in winter now, wait until a $350 per ton tax is added to the price. There are better solutions for reducing greenhouse gases. And here's the article. Liberals' latest plan to penalize Western energy is exactly what Canada doesn't need. With the new session of Parliament quickly coming up, political watchers are busily speculating about the Liberal government's spending spree and climate plan. The government's new agenda is expected to include at least $50 billion in climate spending and subsidies over 5 years. The bigger question is whether the federal government will pursue much tougher regulations that will particularly impact the transportation and oil and gas sectors. These two economic sectors made up 52% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions in 2018. Canada's emissions have been virtually flat at 720 megatons since 2005, so any chance of reaching a 30% reduction in emissions by 2030, as the Liberals have promised to do, looks highly unrealistic without heavily affecting those two sectors. As John Ivison reported in Friday's National Post, the Liberal government may adopt even tougher targets, pursuing stronger measures not currently in use. The most important would be the Clean Fuel Standards, which features an equivalent carbon tax of $350 per ton. This regulation would be on top of the $50 per ton carbon tax that is typically touted as the best economic approach to achieving climate objectives, a position that I agree with, says the author. And in a second, we're going to look at just how effective carbon taxes are if you look at the data. This is just like the mask debate. Oh, well, I believe that it does because, that's what economists say. But the data doesn't support it, right? I believe masks work because all of the not censored doctors tell me it does. Sure. Right? Back to this. Let me find where I was. The CFS would substantially increase heating and transportation costs for households and businesses while applying a much lighter touch to other emissions such as those from the cement and aluminum industry. One goal is to push consumers into buying electric vehicles. Anybody watch Planet of the Humans? This author did not. Which so far remain less than 5% of auto sales. People still prefer SUVs, and SUVs are where Ontario automakers make their best margins. Oh, those evil capitalists, right? Back to this. Despite the babble gaff put out by certain anti-fossil fuel activists and politicians, green jobs don't generate anywhere close to the value added per working hour produced currently in oil, gas, petrochemical, and mining industries. So any policy that particularly penalizes these industries will certainly undermine economic growth, just as the economy is already facing several years of difficulties as we recover from from the current pandemic. I scroll down a little bit further. The issue is whether the Liberal government believes that the oil and gas sector can remain an important part of the future energy transition to net zero emissions. That's called goalpost shifting, by the way, net zero. We were like, we have to reduce our carbon emissions, and now we're net zero. Yeah, sure, net zero. Most plans going to net zero emissions show that oil and natural gas will continue to be important, even if their role is reduced. Yeah, reduced, sure. The Liberal government's actions would suggest otherwise. After the oil price rout in 2014, capital investment in Canadian oil has fallen 55% since 2014. Canada's share of global oil and investment has fallen off 9.3% in 2014 to 7.3% in 2017, and so we don't have the updated numbers. But it's not. I don't think it's responsible to start doing that based on what's been happening for the last couple of months, right? Like the economy has been shut down because the government mandated shutdowns because of the pandemic. And now in order to start up, here's a brand new carbon tax that's equivalent to $350 per ton. And the BC carbon tax doesn't work. Here's the Nelson Daily and its op-ed, and emissions up despite carbon tax. The Canadian Taxpayer Federation is calling on the government of British Columbia to cancel the carbon tax because it's not working according to the provincial government's data. When this carbon tax was first hatched, we were told it would make emissions go down, but the opposite is happening. Emissions are going up, said Chris Sims, BC director of the Canadian Taxpayer Federation. The only thing this carbon tax is doing for BC is costing us all more to drive to work, drop our kids off at school, and heat our homes. The carbon tax is nothing but a cash grab yanked out of the wallets of working people. Data recently posted to the British Columbia government website shows the province's emissions have gone up 10% in the past 3 years, despite the highest carbon tax in Canada. The BC government collected more than $1.4 billion through the provincial carbon tax in 2018. The data posted in a spreadsheet titled Provincial Inventory 1990 to 2018 shows BC's emissions at 6.79 million tons in 2018. That's up from 65.8 million tons, in 2017, and up from 64.4 million tons in 2016. Emissions have gone up in 5 of the last 7 years. If the carbon tax's job is not just to extract money from people and is instead to reduce the emissions, it has been an abject failure. It started in 2008 in British Columbia. We've had 12 years of carbon tax, and in 5 of the last 7 years, the carbon taxes have gone, or the carbon emissions have gone up. Failure. You know what it reminds me of? The safe injection sites, where last year we had 7 deaths in Guelph, and this year I think we have 14 now. Our deaths have doubled, and they're still claiming that this is something that's worthwhile. It's unbelievable. There was a massive mask protest in Montreal yesterday. There was a whole lot of people. I saw 30,000 as a number in Montreal. I saw 5,000 as a number in Ottawa. But that's a lot of people. I still think that protests like this are difficult to get right in Canada because you have to get the cooperation of the media to report it, and you have to get the people out, and it's really hard to get people out. Toronto Star is reporting today's coronavirus news. 84 new infections in Toronto as daily case numbers continue to rise. Oxford University will resume trials of virus vaccine. Ontario reports 232 new cases. This is September 12th. Today's the 13th. I want to remind you that one of the reasons that mandatory masks happened was because they said putting masks on reduced the amount of growth rate for the virus, right? Here it is. This is from Health Affairs. This is one of the many articles I found on this. There was a significant decline in daily COVID growth rate after the mandating of face covers in public, with the effect of increasing over time after the orders were signed. Specifically, the daily case rate declined by 0.9, 1.1, 1.4, 1.7, and 2 percentage points within 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, and 21 or more days after signing, respectively. All of these declines were statistically significant. And yet, if masks work, why are we seeing these increases? As they were saying, over time it gets better, more effective. So over time, now that we've got like almost 95, I would say out in Guelph here, like 90 to 95% compliance. I'm usually the only one. Although yesterday I was at Value Village and somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, they give you a hard time about this?" And I said, "Some people try to give me a hard time, but they find it's very difficult." And we had a laugh, and he had his mask pulled down in the store. And actually I was in the store and another person came in, saw me and my kids And he kind of looked around and he took his mask off and put it in his pocket. And so I kind of, and I didn't say anything to that person, but the other guy came up to me and was talking to me. And that was wonderful. I thought it was a neat experience. And, but stuff like this, and when they're saying this is the reason that we think masks work, just it crystallizes just how flimsy these science people are, right? Like just how flimsy people who say we want to take the best science, right? And you're a science denier. Well, we'll take this flimsy science and then look at this actual data and say, yeah, I'm going to still wear my mask because it's dangerous out there. Like, come on, really? Really? Here's a very public fight between Nenshi and his, who is it? Justice Minister. Alberta Justice Minister warns Edmonton and Calgary not to comply with calls to defund the police. And Madhu told the Post that if cities continue to cut police spending, he would work on a way to give money directly to police forces. And apparently Nenshi's like calling him back out. It's very public, very interesting stuff. Here's Catherine McKenna using Blade Runner images to push her climate ideology, I suppose, on Twitter. And she says, we will get out of this pandemic, but climate change isn't going away. The future is up to us. And this is somebody who shared, Molly says, Blade Runner 2049, that was out in 2017, versus San Francisco in 2020. This is how a film's art directors pictured a world after ecological collapse. This is not a drill. The thing is, though, a lot of these fires, there are a lot of people being arrested for arson, right? And I'm paying attention to Portland and all of these other places that are having very violent riots. And it is not a stretch to believe. I mean, ISIS released instructions to jihadists for fire jihad, right? Like, and to specifically light fires to do stuff like this. This is I'm not saying that this is an ISIS attack or anything like this, but this is an attack vector that has been mapped out by terrorists in the past. And I've witnessed Antifa terrorizing multiple cities all through the United States due to this upcoming presidential election, it looks like. So I don't believe that this is ecological fires, natural fires, and I shared a couple of arson. Here's one. We're at a loss for words. Deputies in Corbett Fire responded to a small brush fire in 1700 block of Northeast Bowers Road in Corbett at 3:52. Neighbors heard pops and saw 6-foot flames in the forest. Using a shovel and water, they were able to put it out. Deputies found fireworks. So, those climate changing fireworks, trees manifesting fireworks that just go off and light fires. It's crazy. This climate change is anything is possible, right? Blade Runner. Okay. So that's what I think about that. Where's the money, Catherine? That's what I think about that. Where's the money? Where's all those projects, right? Okay. Aaron O'Toole's weighing in on cuties. Okay, Aaron O'Toole says, I'm a dad who's deeply disturbed by this Netflix show. Childhood is a time of innocence. We must do more to protect children. This show is exploitative and wrong. This is in response to a True North report on Netflix claims that the film is a social commentary against the sexualization of young children. I still don't think that you should be able to broadcast that directly into homes. I don't know. I think there were laws against that. This is an interesting story. I said this is embarrassing. I'm not going to show go look at this, the picture. I'm not going to show it other than that because I think it's just not. Oh my goodness. I didn't mean to do that. I really didn't mean to do that. I'm going to leave that. Okay. Allegations. Go look at it. It's really weird. Here's the Toronto Sun saying, allegations of misusing money meant to promote Canadian art overseas has rubbed Canadian taxpayers the wrong way. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation this week uncovered examples of how the $1.75 million Mission Cultural Fund meant to promote Canadian artists abroad as a means of advancing foreign policy is being spent, including funding a titillating art expo in Germany. Running from August to October in 2019, was a solo art exhibition by Peaches, a Toronto-born musician and performance artist known for edgy music and edgier art installations. The exhibition, held in Hamburg, Germany, featured works based around double masturbator sex toys, a latex fleshie featuring a fully featured mouth at one end and a vagina on the other. The centerpiece of the show was a large water fountain consisting of a number of double-ended sex toys spouting water from both their mouths and vaginas. Peaches, born Meryl Nisker, was paid $8,813.70 to fund the show, along with funding from the Canadian Embassy in Berlin, Canada's Council for the Arts, and other arts foundations in Germany, where she has maintained permanent residency for the past 20 years. Okay, so she's a Canadian-born person who's lived in Berlin for the last 20 years, and she thinks Canadian art is a double-ended sex toy spouting water from the mouth and the vagina? Yeah, that's not a great use of taxpayer money. I don't think that's what anybody would want to have representing Canada. Like, oh, welcome, let's go see the Canadian sex exhibit, Martha. Or I don't know what the German equivalent to Martha is, but whatever that is. But you know, right? No, oh, isn't that culturally odd? So yeah, I don't know that this furthers the goal of the cultural fund to promote the Canadian artists abroad or advancing any kind of foreign policy. I don't know that it does that, but it's certainly offensive. So there's that. And I mean, in the scope of the spending that we're doing, and in the scope of all of the other ridiculous money, is this really what you want to spend your money on? I don't think so. All right, I've been talking too long already. I thought it was going to be a short show today. All right, it's not. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful day.